Let's see, 2 bars on that battery. Fabulous. So, I made a video a couple of weeks ago. It's probably been a week. It's extremely ironic how much it actually is coming into focus. 2 years ago, I read a book in 4 days. The first time that I read it, it was an ebook. It was never actually published by anybody. Just the guy that wrote the book put it out on his own website. And he never even had it edited by somebody else, I don't think, because there were misspellings and punctuation errors and invented out of thin air words all over the book. Kind of annoying in a way, but the actual information itself was fabulous. So I read through the book once in 4 days, and immediately that same day started noticing some difference in, you know, in how my interactions were going. This is about 2 years ago, and I started going out on the dating sites, trying to apply some of what the book said to online dating, even though the book kind of says don't do that. yeah, well, don't do that. So basically the book is called The Flow. I don't remember what site I found it on, but it wasn't that expensive, and to me the way it was presented sounded, you know, like it was probably worthwhile information, and it really turned out to be just that. It basically says that the interaction between a man and a woman has to kind of follow a certain trail or a certain path, and we're talking to stay out of, say, the friend zone. You end up in the friend zone by not acting on how you feel about a woman, and thus it's kind of your own fault. You didn't put yourself in the right position to not go into the friend zone, you could say. So in essence, you read the whole book and it just talks about this whole, you know, thing that everybody's talking about: domination, submission, and this one really delves into confidence. It could be depicted as a book just on how to pick up women, but it even says in the book that's not really what's intended here. The intention is for you to, you know, find happiness with your life. So after I read the book in 4 days and went out and started applying some of the little things that it said in the book, I immediately noticed differences in how women interacted with me and how easy it was for me to approach them out of thin air at, say, the dog park, or if I went to karaoke or something like that. So a few days ago I said this same basic thing and lost that video, and then after I got out of the grocery store and started heading to work, I started up the video again, and I still have that portion. So now I'm going to change clothes miraculously as I go into King Soopers, and when I come back out, we will continue this conversation last week. All right, so as I was saying, confidence and domination. We're not talking about 50 Shades here, although some of that stuff could be fun, I suppose. I've never had anybody that was interested in trying any weird stuff like that, so I've never done it. I am pretty vanilla, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about confidence on a personal, how you act. It used to be that men learned these, little traits, these little things they do, or they used to do, from their fathers, who learned it from their fathers, and so on and so forth. And a lot of that was knocked out of us, of course, by the whole women's lib movement. Men were confused and lost, and like my father, he was living through that period, and you had the women taking off their bras in public and throwing them away, and wanting to vote, and that's all good and great. I have nothing against that. I think women are wonderful and quite often significantly smarter than men, just in the planning and putting things together sort of thing. Men are grunts. We go out and we do physical labor, and we chase down cows and deer, and we farm and dig in the ground, and we're physical. And they were at home raising children and having to figure out how to get dinner on the table and clean the house and do laundry and pull all of it off in an amazing short period of time, and organize things and keep stuff straight. That's what women did for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and their brains were developing much faster than us grunts. We're out, killing deer and all that. So, I think it's awesome that women want to be, voting, and I think that it's awesome that, women are getting the same rights as men. But in the 60s, when we were going through that period, things changed for men. They really didn't know where they stood. And women really didn't either. It was a complete redefinition of our society. And so, when it comes to the relationship between Sean and I had spent a couple of years making myself, really confident and build myself up and, try to be more that way, do more gentlemanly stuff in addition. But I'm talking more about the non-submissive me. My mother, who was a Catholic schoolgirl and was raised by a Catholic woman and a Catholic man that worked. My grandmother was a teacher, but she barely made any money at all, and my grandfather eventually made her stop because he didn't like what was going on at the house, and he thought that he should be the boss. So my mother grew up in basically the kind of relationship that I'm talking about in a way, except that my grandpa Eunuch was a little more, non-feminist. Definitely was, kind of a male chauvinist in a way. A very Catholic and a very good man, and he was extremely wonderful. But he didn't like his wife working, and that's what my mother grew up in, and that's who my mother raised me. So, but my mother was also part of the movement to want, women's rights, and that's awesome too. But she was on that cusp. That's my point. She was part of that set, that coming about. So she told me after my father left, and my father didn't know, he's not a dominating guy, but my father, or at least he wasn't very dominating back then. He might be today. I don't know him that well anymore. He has kind of been out of my life for a lot of years, but I was raised by my mother, not my father. My father had little bits of input here and there, and my mother raised me to be nice. She told me, if you want a good woman in your life, you have to be nice. You have to always be very nice. Don't ever be mean. And as I was rejected by women and broke up with girls and, had to put up with my stepfathers not really being dominating guys or ever teaching me, they were just a-holes. They were not nice people. First stepfather that Heather and I had, Jake, he was just as wimpy as I've ever been. He tried to put forth that he was a tough guy, but the fact is that he was not a tough guy, and he was definitely not a gentleman, and he was definitely not the kind of dominating I'm talking about. He was the other kind of dominating. This is where we get into the fun part. And there's a fine line between domination on the level I'm talking about and being an asshole. People fall for the asshole all the time. Assholes are confident, but they're really not. They're acting like they're confident, and sometimes they are confident, but they're still assholes. Their domination method, or their dominance is from domination. Their dominance isn't from just being confident. And some of them have confidence, some of them don't. When I was in high school, Matt was a buddy of mine. He's kind of a dorky looking guy. You could almost give him the super innocent Chucky doll kind of a look, before he was nuts, obviously. But Matt could date any girl he wanted. It didn't matter. He was a dork. He was not respected by really anybody. And yet, he always had the most beautiful girlfriends for a couple of days. He could put forth the confidence to pretty much land any girl that he wanted to. But once they got to know him, because it was all just an act, he was playing the asshole. He would meet a girl and he would dominate her, and she would fall for him, and then he'd get tired of her in a couple of days, or she'd realize that he was a total dork and dump him. However it went, it would only ever last a week, maybe at the most, maybe 2. But I knew I could do better than that. I just didn't know how to even do what he was doing. All I knew at the time was that he had all these girls. There were always these gorgeous women hanging on Matt, and as soon as he'd get rid of one, he'd have another one. And he'd get rid of one, they'd break up, and he'd have another one in a couple of days. We'd go out to the bar, he'd have some girl with him almost immediately that we never met. He'd dance on he was putting forth this confidence and this boldness, but it was based on being an asshole. He had learned that women fell for that trick. A lot of women do. It's why you go on these dating sites and they're like, I always meet the same asshole over and over and over. Well, it's because you're dating the same assholes over and over and over again. And women do it constantly, and they fall for it all the time. But the book teaches that you don't have to be the asshole. And you don't have to be aggressive and mean. You can just be more confident and more dominating and take a manly role. In the end, it says that basically when a woman says she wants a real man, that's the man she's looking for. She's looking for the guy who's confident, but he's confident because he himself believes in himself and what he can do, and you know, of course, that's where I was trying to put myself. I was trying to be, I'm not a dominating guy. I'm not, you know, I was naturally taught to be nice. And there's a rabbit in the middle of the parking lot over there, and Hoshi saw it. So the question is, what does the girl want, really? You know, I'm not talking about who does she want on the, you know, she doesn't want the asshole usually. Most women don't want to be treated like crap. They want somebody who's going to respect them, but they don't want somebody who's going to say, "Where do you want to go to dinner, honey? I don't care." I was that guy all the way up until Christmas. October, November, and December, most of December, not quite the whole thing, I was mostly that guy. But when she started to, you know, I'm sure some of the nice guy in me was still coming out a little bit, because it's hard to get that to go away. But she started beating me down. You know, she started treating me like crap every time I got her on the phone, and I naturally revert right back to the little nice boy that I normally was when I was young. I know it's not what to do, but I started, you know, crying when she'd threatened to take off. That's not very confident or, you know, dominant. I would submit to her constantly. If she said something aggressively at me, taking the dominating role, I would submit immediately, because I wanted to be nice and I didn't want to fight. And as that went along, it got worse and worse and worse, and I became less and less and less confident in myself, and eventually she started missing Ron, who's an asshole. Thank you.